Hi, I'm Bryce McClenny with JB Custom Rods, and today I'm going to continue my series on helping you find the best bass rod for your money. For video number 1, we talked a whole lot about the blanks of a rod and what makes one blank better than the other for your particular application. Today I'm going to get a little bit deeper into something else, another component of the rod, which is the guides of the rod, or the eyes of the rod, if you will. And that not all of them are created equal. They're made from different materials. They're laid out differently on the blank, and those can make a huge difference in performance of that rod. So there's a couple of different materials they use in these. Some of them, you talk about your cheaper, this is my daughter's little perch fishing rod. This one is very simply right here, just a little plastic inlay, hardened plastic inside of more plastic. It costs just pennies. It's great for a kid's first rod. It's great for a rod you're going to use infrequently and you don't want to spend a lot of money on it. But it's really not going to hold up over time, and it's really not going to take the beating that we put on rods, when we go out and spend entire days fishing. We're switching tackle, we're switching materials, we're switching weights. It's not going to hold up over time, and it's not something that's always just put on cheap rods. Sometimes manufacturers, to cut costs, will try to go with some of these lesser grade materials, and make sure when you're looking at that when you're in the store, you can tell the difference between a plastic and the other two types I'm going to talk about, which are ceramics and hardened alloys. I'm going to show you the advantages and disadvantages of each. But to me, those are really the two that kind of set the gold standard: hardened alloy and ceramic. So the first one I'm going to talk about is ceramic. Ceramic guides, like on this old Bud Earhart rod I've got here, and I'm using this one because it's really easy to see that inlay there. The black inlay is ceramic, and it's sitting inside of this gold colored metal material out here. Now, the advantage of a ceramic guide is ceramic is a very durable material. You're not going to cut it, you're not going to nick it, you're not going to beat it up when you're, being rough on the rod, if you're, using the heavy braided lines a lot, if you're reeling up, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. You reel up that lure and leave that eye of the lure sitting right there on the tip of the rod. It's much, much more durable than even the hardened alloy is, and holds up to that really, really well. It's hard to scratch this stuff. Even with a chainsaw file, you can't hardly scratch it. The one disadvantage, which is a major disadvantage in my opinion, of ceramic, is that inlay will pop out. And a lot of us have done this before. I've done it quite a bit, where be fishing along and you'll get to pop a lure off a stump, or something will happen during the day, and that all of a sudden that inlay has been removed and it's sliding up and down your line and it never goes back on, and you've got to replace the tip of that rod. That's something that happens quite a bit with them, and it is a major disadvantage to them. And it's the reason that for the most part we've switched to using hardened alloy now as opposed to ceramics, unless someone requests ceramics, that is. Hardened alloy is a little different ball game. You don't have an inlay in there that's going to pop out. It's all built into one and cupped in when that's made, so it's not going to pop out. It's not going to pop off when you beat it against a stump or something. You can still break the tip of the rod, but you're going to have to break that entire eye to break it, which is a big advantage to these. They're also extremely durable. Braided lines not going to hurt them. Fluorocarbon lines not going to hurt them. They're built for the long haul. The one thing I will say where I have had issues is when I've done just what I was talking about earlier and reeled that lure up into the end of that rod and not paying attention, and the eye of that lure is laying within the eye of that rod, and it sits there all day vibrating and nicking and scratching, and it will create some small micro abrasions that you can barely see with the naked eye. But what those will do is they'll abrade your line, and you'll end up breaking your line, setting the hook on a fish, and you'll be yelling and you'll be cussing and you'll be fussing about that eye on the rod. So you need to pay attention for that when you're using hardened alloy. The advantage to hardened alloy, like I say, is that tip top does not pop out. It'll be in there forever. Either way, whether you pop out an insert on a ceramic or whether you scratch up a hardened alloy, it's pretty simple to replace that. You simply heat up the tip of the rod with a heat gun. You can do it with a lighter. You can do it with anything. I've done it right there on the boat before, standing there for a guy. It says, hey, I've got this rod that, something's cutting my line. I'll say, hey, let me replace the tip top for you. Heat it up, hold it with a pair of pliers, pop it off. Take your new guide, put a little bit of epoxy stick inside of there, melt it down and get that epoxy stick nice and liquid. pop it on the top, holding it with the pliers, give it about a quarter turn one way and the other, center it up where it needs to be on that rod tip, and then just let it sit there for a couple of hours and let that epoxy harden, and you're going to be just fine. You're going to be back in business, and you can do this for pennies. It's not hard at all to do. So if that happens, then the rod's not a lost cause. It can be easily repaired, and a lot of you have done this yourselves. If you hadn't, next time you have an issue with a tip top on your rod, the top eye, just give it a try. It's not hard at all. You can do it in just a few minutes right there. Other thing to look at, and guys asked a lot about this a lot of times, is casting distance, casting accuracy on a rod. This has everything to do with the other end. This has to do with the guide that's nearest to the spool. So casting distance is largely determined by this. If that first eye is too close to that spool, you're getting a lot of friction coming off the spool, and it's not going to cast as well. In the same, if you get it too far away and too far out here, you get a lot of line slap on the blank while you're loading up the cast, and you're going to get a lot more friction. And there's a quick and easy way to test this while you're standing right there in the store. You can do it. Take that rod and bend it pretty good ways. And if you see it bending or flexing at all beyond where that first eye is too far away from that spool, and it's not going to cast, and it's not going to perform as well. Now, if you're doing this in the store and you see that it's bending way, way, way further out than what the first eye goes, it's probably too close to the spool, and you're going to get friction, and you're not going to at least get as good a performance as you possibly can. So if you look at this one right there where kind of that bend stops is where that first eye is, and that's going to give you the best performance. Obviously, with lighter action rods, it's going to bend further down. You got to get it closer into the spool. With heavier action rods, you can get it out pretty far, and you can make it cast a really, really super long ways by doing that. Just depends on the rod blank. The action of the rod is a lot to do with that. Another big thing to look at, and if you look at it on our rod, you'll see what I'm talking about here, the layout of those guides. So I'm holding this upright right now, and you'll notice that guide's coming out the bottom. So we do spiral wrap on all of our rods. The first guide will be on top of the blank, and then we bring it around to the bottom of the blank. And I get a ton of questions on this at the shows. Was somebody drunk when they built this? Is this a two-piece rod? What's going on with this rod? And no, it's very much on purpose, and it's very much for performance. And we've tested over the years different systems, micro guides, standard guide layouts, microwave guides for spinning rods. We've done it all, and spiral wrap on a bait casting rod just performs better than any other layout you're going to use. And the reason is, again, friction. You're bringing that line out around the bottom of the rod. There's very little line slap where that line's not laying on top of that blank and slapping that blank as you're loading up and casting. The other thing is when you get a big fish in close to the boat and that fish is digging and going under the boat, that line's not rolling over the top of the rod and flip-flopping one way or the other. That line's coming out the bottom, and anywhere that fish goes, the tip of that rod's going to follow that fish around. I demonstrate this at the shows year after year after year. We have guys buy one of our rods and come back the next year and say, man, this spiral wrap, I was worried about it at first, but it is so awesome. I want more. This is the best way to go with a bait cast rod. And we truly believe that. And that's why we've been building them that way for 20 years. It was something that was patented in the 1920s. And the reason you don't see it more is because it's really hard to do that in a factory and mass produce it, because those guides have to be hand laid. So a lot of mass-produced rods, they're just not going to take the time to do that in that setting. It does perform better, though. The Bud Earhart rod I was showing you earlier, spiral wrap rod. We've known this for a long time that it's a better layout, and it's just not done that much. But if you ever pick one up and use it and try it, I guarantee you won't go back, because it is just a better way to build a bass rod. So if you have any more questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the comments. Look us up on Facebook at JB Custom Rods and send us a direct message. Visit us at jbcustomrods.net, and I'll see you next time.